Hey TV fans, I am bored now. On this video I'm going to be talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3 Episode 2. The episode is called Wedding Bell Blues. I will be getting into full spoilers for this episode, but just to tease you about something at the end of the episode you can look forward to, and it's something I'm going to be doing throughout this series of Strange New Worlds. And that is, I will be talking about a classic episode of Star Trek, so something probably from one of the older shows, just like a random episode which I will be watching. And that's just a little add-on to the Strange New Worlds review. As I hinted last time, this is a very different episode to the premiere episode. And it's something which I do enjoy about Strange New Worlds, is how it plays with different gimmicks and it can have different tones episode to episode. It really adds some variety, and because it is a little bit of a return to the episodic Trek show, then there is room to do that, and it does make sense. It also means you can do different things with the characters in those episodes, and that's something this episode does. Around the centenary of the Federation and those celebrations, and you get like a big ball to celebrate it, and a coming together of like Federation staff and the crew, and some of the crew's families are there. For example, Ortega's brother. The shot, when it comes to Spock at least, is that Nurse Chapel arrives for the event, and it turns out that during her time away she has met someone else. Yes, she has a new boyfriend called Roger, who's this super intelligent kind of suave doctor, and he is her date for the event. Seems to ingratiate himself to the other crew members as well, and seems to be making Chapel very happy. So Spock kind of bears his soul to this mystery bartender. It's a genie episode, or it's a godlike being episode in some ways, and I'll get to that later on. But Spock makes a wish to this, without realising, makes a wish to the bartender, saying that he wishes Roger and Chapel weren't so close. So he's given this drink, this green drink, which turns out is basically a potion, and it puts Spock under a spell, or it changes things around so Spock and Chapel are actually together. Spock wakes up with Chapel, and not only that, but they are engaged to be married. It's no longer the ball to mark the centenary, it's actually going to be their wedding. And Roger is just basically the best man. He's like nothing really to Chapel. And the only people who know about the spell, or know that something has gone on and it isn't right, is Spock and Roger. So that then leads to one of the fun things about the episode, is that Spock has to work with his adversary when it comes to Chapel's affections, to try and switch things all around, to try and figure out what exactly is going on, and then to try and make things better. And to add a little bit to the gimmick, is then the genie, if you want to call him that, goes full-blown villain, confront him with it and say, look, you've got to put this right, you've got to change everything back. And he refuses to do that, and he says there will be consequences if you go against my wishes. But it's a very light-hearted, very playful sort of episode for the most part, and they have to try and find ways around it, and when he turns the tables, they have to try and work within that and come up with a way. It's a very solid episode. It's a good, like, lighter comedic episode with a couple of laugh out loud moments, and I do like the way they play with the gimmick throughout the episode as well. It's one of those, really, I can see this not being to everyone's taste, see this being quite a divisive episode. But it does work well as like a palate cleanser, I think, for the super full-on and intense opening to the season. So it is a nice sort of more relaxing episode on the back of that. But it does do a couple things to like build characters as well, which I appreciated. So it's not a perfect episode, but I think the placement of it does make sense. One of the fun things about the episode is actually figuring out what the gimmick of the episode is going to be, because the title doesn't really give away that much. In the early part of the episode, I had a feeling there was going to be some sort of a love connection, because you had all these couples in the episode, or like hints of romance. Pike and Patel, for example, seem to be closer than ever. She's going to be his date for the Federation event, and we get some more scenes of them as a couple. She's pretty much fully healed now. But also there's this weird flirtation between Uhura and Ortega's brother, and you see how Ortega and her brother is quite competitive. You get like this sparring scene between where they're boxing. Distracted, she knocks him out with, as she says, a haymaker. But there's a little bit of a vibe between those two from the start, and it becomes a thing where Ortega's like, no, I don't want you dating my brother. But that's before the gimmick has actually started. But at that point in the episode, because I thought that seemed a bit funny that they were pushing maybe a flirtation with those two characters, then I thought maybe the gimmick had already started. Then maybe there was something where people on the ship were under some sort of a love spell. If there is a complaint, or one complaint, then I think it's that. Like, it's just this thing, then not everyone has to have a relationship on this show. And I know in classic Trek there was a lot of different romances and things like that, but a lot of times that would just be for like a one-off episode, or it wouldn't be every character from memory. And I know this is a modern show and they like to give characters arcs, and giving a horror romance is part of like an arc and development, and that's all fine. I just don't think you need every character to have a romance. It seems a bit sort of forced. Now, if they do go through with it, until I get to know more about the brother and see more of him and how they bounce off each other, because it's hard to get a sense from this episode and their short scenes together if they would really have good chemistry. But there's something a little bit too bright and colourful and fluffy about those scenes, and it does resemble a little bit of a CW show. Those scenes, I'm not saying the show in general, but it does have that thing which some people complain about modern Trek about. And I think it's partly because Uhura's quite smiley in the episode, and she's got quite sort of big sort of hair, and she's got this bright orange shirt at some point. And yeah, I just wonder about that stuff. Speaking of characters who you see a different side to in this episode, Lan is definitely one that fits that, because I enjoyed the opening scene where it's her teaching Spock how to do like ballroom style dancing ahead of the dance, and how awkward he looks and his attempts to do dance, and just how ungraceful he is. And that's something which they call back to later on, which is a nice little payoff. But he questions, of course, like, this really seems out of character for her, and of course it does. But she reveals that before she became what she became, she actually dreamed of being a ballerina. It works in the episode. It's like this nice little subplot, and it makes sense. And maybe this was her dream, and she is, when it comes to that kind of thing, like a natural performer, because I think in the musical episode, like, her singing was some of the best in the episode. And she does have this other like sort of more feisty kind of like performative side to her, and we see her doing the dance in this scene, and it is very graceful. And it's nice how she's there for Spock later on in the episode, and when everything has gone back to normal, they do have a dance to like call back to the earlier scene. And she's also there for Spock as a shoulder when things are back to normal, when Chapel goes back and she dances with Roger. A really great thing, and that you did, and there are different ways to express like love and romance, and that was one of them. And just giving him the G up a little bit and supporting him and say, yeah, you were really there for her and did a great thing. Other little thing to maybe pick at a bit is what Chapel does in a way to start this thing off. It does make her look a little bit douchey because, first of all, she seems to have moved on quite fast, and she seems to have fallen into this romance quite fast. Of course, that can happen, and maybe the way she left and everything, she decided that without confirming it 100%, then probably the Spock thing was over and she's moving on with her life. But it does seem like she's moved on fast, and they do that television thing where at first Roger is introduced as just like, he's here for the event, he's been working with Chapel, he is a doctor, but then it's revealed that, hey, he's my date, we're together and things like that, and it's sort of dropped on Spock really, so it does make Chapel come across as a little bit of a villain at first. Now it does help then she takes Spock aside, apologises for it, says that's not the way I wanted you to find out about that. She doesn't really give an explanation, but she does say it's a little bit out of character from what I said before we left, and we see that it becomes more and more awkward for Spock to be around them because she says, hey, we're having drinks later. So I think that scene helps cushion it a little bit, and it's obviously just like a TV type thing to have this kind of sting. And it's something which I definitely saw coming. Like, I definitely got the vibe he was going to be revealed for the sake of drama as like Chapel's boyfriend. Some of the way they do the scenes with Spock when he's around them and he's putting on like a brave face and trying to say the right thing, but it's just very awkward, it's very well done. There's this whole story about like a poem, Chapel and Roger, who's his name, who I think is a solid guest star as well. Like that actor does a pretty decent job, about how they went to like the mountains. I think there's like a story to the mountains that they go to, which the poem was maybe based on, and it gives her like this particularly like special bracelet, and so watching that for Spock is very hard. Good callback for that later in the episode, because that poem does come back into it with what Spock does when him and Chapel are supposed to be married. It's a way to like snap people out of it and realise that, hey, this isn't, to snap Chapel out of it and realise, yeah, this isn't actual reality. So that's a clever little loophole and a way that they play with a gimmick, a way for Spock to reverse things, twist, which is like a very nostalgic thing, but it's a thing that makes sense and works really well in the episode, for me at least, is that it turns out that this alien being who's causing this is actually a relative of Q's. He's Q's son, and this works so well, and it makes sense because that has been set up in like Next Generation, for example. So we actually get John Delancey's voice at the end of the episode because Q shows up, not physically, but from above, and it turns out he didn't know all this, and he's telling his son, no, this is not good enough, you shouldn't have done this, reverse everything now, and he eventually forces him, and it's one of those playful things, like, it's not an episode like the last one where there's high stakes and you think, oh my god, people could end up dead here. A very kind of like visually eye-popping like feel to it, with some of like the attire for this wedding and the different, like, because at one point when the spell happens, suddenly this guy becomes like the wedding planner, and he's this very like ostentatious sort of wedding planner who's like quite like demanding and has his own set ways. And there's a fun little thing where they've bought Chapel's mother's flowers that she had at her wedding, because Nurse Chapel wants them for the wedding with Spock. And it turns out that they're pretty much disintegrated, but he's able to like bring them back to life basically and add a bit of colour. And once again, it's a sign of how in this modern Trek show there's a bit more of a budget and production values, and it just works in the episode. It makes it a very playful, colourful episode. So I did enjoy the look of the episode because of what the episode was doing. The guest star, like the main guest star, very good. He's having so much fun in the role and just leans into like the ridiculous of it and some of the antics and just how kind of camp he is. And you get one of the funniest moments in the episode is that when Roger tries to interrupt the wedding, he's turned into like a dog basically. He turned into a pit bull, and so because he's already got like this fancy sort of green attire on, so him suddenly as a pit bull but in this green attire, Chris Kirk, so he's the one holding the lead with this pit bull who's Roger. So that's really funny. The episode which was really funny is the scene with Chris Kirk, because one of the things they discover is that there's this thing about knocking a person out and then you realise what's going on, because at first Spock doesn't know what's going on. Like he's just woken up in this reality and thinks, yeah, this is nothing to this. And it's when Roger comes in and he starts like protesting, like, no, this isn't right. I'm with Chapel. You're not supposed to be marrying her. So they get into a thing and Spock knocks him out, and that snaps Spock out of it. Like, and then he kind of faints and they both wake up and Spock is suddenly in on it. Like reality has been restored to him. So they do this thing with Kirk where they're trying to convince him, trying to get Kirk to hit Spock, and to do that Spock winds him up, like, so he's saying things like, no one likes your moustache, your taste in wine is really bad. There's another insult I can't remember. It's like 3 insults, and so it's really funny, like the delivery from Ethan Peck and the reactions, and just then he's trying to goad him into hitting him. So there's fun ways that they play with the gimmick like that throughout the episode, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's not a perfect episode, but it's light and fluffy. It's quite stylish. It's very sort of playful, and it's enjoyable. The comedy in the episode works really well. We do get a darker sting in the tail as well, which is with Ortega's, because we end with the ball as planned and everyone's dancing, so Spock gets to dance with Loran as they were rehearsing earlier. Wake Me Up Before You Go, which is a great choice to be having. It's funny that this far into the future then that's kind of a hip song they would have at something like that. But it definitely works for the scene. But while everyone is like in a fun type mood and dancing, Ortega's retreats and seems upset by something, and Pike notices, but she runs out of the ball, and we see her then back in her room and she's sparring. Suddenly the Gorn monster appears to her out of nowhere, so it's like the green dinosaur type one, as I called it last time, that appears to her in the mirror and disturbs her. So this is something we're going to be doing clearly with Ortega's, where she's still going to have this on her mind, like the trauma from what happened with the Gorn is still going to be something which is plaguing her. It could even be a thing where there's a gimmick where it's like it's a darker side to Ortega's than she does maybe have a Gorn side, than she's somehow been infected, or just than it's like a darker side to her and it's like a subconscious. It's a good thing to explore with Ortega's, because she's a character who, you know her as a bit of a wisecracker and yeah, maybe a bit of a more lighter comedic character. So to have something a bit more serious like that with her and go a bit darker with her. I think that could be a good thing, and just explore a different side to her. So that was a good sting in the tail at the end of the episode. That was well done, considering how light-hearted pretty much all the episode had been. So that was a nice little sting in the tail and a tease. A good episode, solid episode. Like I said, it does have a particular vibe and a gimmick which may rub some people up the wrong way. I could see it like this not being everyone's cup of tea, but I enjoyed it for the most part, as I said, with maybe one or two small nitpicks. And the episode of Classic Trek, which I will be looking at this week, is from Star Trek The Next Generation, and it's the opening episode of the final season, Season 7. It is called The Descent Part 2. Warning that I will be going into spoilers for this episode in case you've never seen it. And yeah, I'm going deep. The reason for this is just because I've been watching Next Gen for the first time all the way through. I'd seen old episodes before, but a first proper watch of it. And this just happens to be the episode I'm on, and it's a really big episode also. It follows on from the dramatic cliffhanger at the end of Season 6, and that is after experiencing emotions for the first time, or aggressive emotions anyway, in an encounter with the Borg, Data is manipulated into turning his back on his crew and friends, track him down to this planet, and it's a planet where the Borg has been taken over and they're being used as slaves. And it turns out the person behind the whole thing is Data's brother Lorne, who we've come across before, and he says, I'm gonna complete my father's experiment. So Data has been turned to his side. The setup episode for this was really good in itself, but the payoff episode, the second part, is even better. It's a really good episode. One of the things that really makes it is, of course, Brett Spiner's performance as like the more evil side of Data. He really plays it so well. He plays both brothers very well, because you can see that he's really enjoying flexing his muscles a bit as like the more sinister Lorne character. And the trick to it is that it doesn't feel like too over the top and hammy and like mustached her, and it feels like it's still kind of within reason for like an android and for like this is like Data's brother, but it's just like subtle changes like the mannerisms or a certain lift in the voice or something like that. So he's really having a good time playing this different side to Data and plays him so well. But then even when he's playing Data in the episode, it doesn't feel like this extreme change just because he happens to be on like the villain side. It's just because really the idea is that he's just been manipulated and it's like this natural thing, and it's almost like he doesn't really see how he's doing anything wrong. So again, it's played quite straight as Data. There's probably subtle things where it's like, okay, this feels a bit different, but he plays both halves of it very well. Perfect. And at one point he's asked to take Geordie's visor, and it's because they can use that as like part of the experiment, but then he has to like almost torture Geordie to try and as part of this stuff. And because of their personal history, this is what makes this so perfect to play with, and just lifts the stakes a little bit, and you do feel sorry for Geordie and the vulnerability and what this could do in a way for like their friendship. So that stuff is very well done. Another little bonus of the episode is that you get to see Beverly as like captain of the Enterprise, and that's because Picard has gone down as part of like the mission on the planet. Riker is also down, like he's in a separate group with Worf. So essentially when it comes to ranking, Beverly is like the highest one left on the ship then can be captain. So it's fun seeing her play the captain for an episode, and she does it well. She's a pretty solid captain, and there's also quite a fun dynamic with her and like an ensign who's only been there a few weeks or something, and already she's got like an upgrade because the situation calls for it, where she's put in like this important position for Ardady. And you want to say it's a little bit because like Beverly knows as a woman in that position, she knows how tough it is to like get your break and stuff, and there's a little bit, but then there's a bit of a tension because you've got this other officer who Beverly brings in at some point, who's a little bit of an expert, and he clashes with the ensign and they disagree about how to proceed. And that actor just comes off, he's got a sort of a face and a tone where he's like, okay, yeah, this guy, even though he is basically on the good side, he does come off as a little bit passive aggressive and douchey, and there's a clash between him and this ensign on how to proceed. But when the ensign figures things out and comes up with a good thing, and it's like she gets the approval from Beverly, it is really satisfying. So that was a nice little subplot too. So yeah, The Descent Part 2 is a really strong episode of Next Gen. I'll give it 8.5. If you've got an episode you want me to do, then maybe suggest it. But let me know what you think of this episode of Strange New Worlds, and also if you've seen the classic Next Gen episode I reviewed, then let me know what you think of that one as well. But keep watching Star Trek, and I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.